Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Connor and I'm a fourth year medical student studying in the City of London. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, then welcome. Remember to hit that subscribe button below because I know you're going to love this video. In this series, I share with you my best evidence-based study techniques. We're going to discuss how and why they work and how you can include them in your studying so that your studying is more effective and more productive. I've really enjoyed making this series for you all so far. I've absolutely loved doing some research into why it is that different studying techniques work for different people, what studying techniques are pretty much guaranteed to work for everyone, and there is quite a lot of work behind the scenes, so I would really appreciate a subscribe. Today I'm going to be talking about what I think is quite a rarely spoken about study technique, and that is interleaved studying. What is interleaved studying? Interleaved studying, at its most basic, is the practice of combining your studying between different topics. For example, if I had 3 topics to revise for one exam, say my exam happened to be on cardiac physiology, neuroanatomy, and on the functions of the kidney, so rather than setting aside specific time for each of those blocks, I would be chunking them together in batches. The most intuitive and the most commonly used method for studying by university students and students of all levels and ages is to set aside time and block out different topics. So you set one day or one morning for a particular topic and then you move on to something else. This is also the technique that's chosen by the vast majority of teachers. So you have an hour's class or a 2-hour class and it will be on one topic, and then at the end of that you'll probably do some practice questions, all of which will relate to that topic you've just learned. Now, at first glance, this makes the most sense. You just learned something, and so you are practicing it straight away to try and kind of drill it into your head. For learning, it does make sense. So for in the classroom, for in a lecture hall, for in a tutorial, it does make sense to learn something and then practice it. This is a fantastic way of learning. It takes your learning from being a passive experience to an active exercise. But the magic of interleaved practicing really comes into its own at the revision stage. Firstly, I need you all to remember, and as I've said in every one of my videos about studying, learning is an active process, not a passive process. Now I know that every single one of you will have already watched my video on why learning and repetition in learning matters, and on why revision of the same topic needs to be spaced out across a period of time. I suspect that you would like an example and an explanation of why interleaved studying really works. And I'm going to give you one. But first of all, I need you to smash that like button below. Smashed it? Let's move on. Think back to the last exam that you sat. Now, unless it was a very specific exam or you were just very lucky, I'm guessing that the exam didn't follow a structure that looked like this, where you had all of the questions of one topic grouped together, followed by questions from another topic, and then questions from a third topic. This is very rare in exams and it's almost never done. Much more likely, the questions in your exam looked a bit more like this, where you had questions from every topic spread out across the exam and all mixed up and jumbled together. Now, wouldn't it just make sense to approach your revision in the same way? Or else you're going to fall into the trap of not really knowing how to work out what a question is asking you to do, but just knowing how to repeat the same process over and over again. The very first part of doing well in any exam is knowing what the question is asking, because you cannot answer a question if you don't know what it's asking. The very common phrase, practice makes perfect, but it's only perfect practice that makes perfect. If you're practicing the wrong thing, you're going to get better at doing the wrong thing. Now for the example of interleaved practice in practice and why it works. So studies have found through random allocation of students to 2 different sample groups, and both sets of students were taught 4 tutorials on the same content. The only difference came in when they practiced. So the students in the blocked content group were given 4 tutorials on calculating the volume of 4 different types of shape. And they had 4 practice sessions, and in each one of those practice sessions they were given 4 questions on calculating the volume of one type of shape. The interleaved practice group were given the same 4 tutorials on working out the same volume of the same 4 shapes, and then they also had 4 practice sessions. Now in their 4 practice sessions, what they were given was 1 question on each of the 4 types. Each group completed 16 practice questions, 4 for each type of block, but the blocked group were given those 4 altogether, and the interleaved were given 1 from each type of shape. Scientists then measured everyone's accuracy for these questions, and maybe unsurprisingly, the blocked group really outperformed the interleaved group in those practice sessions. So when they were asked to do 4 of the same type of question in a row, they did much better. The really interesting thing happened at the test. Now the test they gave was similar to a test that you and I will have sat, where you don't have everything bunched up together, The test that the students sat was a mixture of all of the different types of volumes of shapes that they had to calculate. Now this is much more like the practice done by the interleaved group, and unsurprisingly here, when you think about the practice, the interleaved group vastly outperformed the other group. The interleaved group in the test performed up to 3 times better on average. I'm putting up a graph here, and as you can see from this graph, while grouping your practice of each topic into blocks of one question type means that you perform better in practice tests, when it comes to the real test, interleaved studying performs up to 3 times better than block studying. So why is it that interleaving your practice rather than blocking out your practice works? Well, there are 2 schools of thought here, and I think it's likely that rather than being mutually exclusive and one or the other, it's probably a combination of them. Now, the first of these hypotheses is the practice retrieval hypothesis. Now, in summary, this is the idea that by combining practice of different types of question, you are having to delve back into your memory each time, and you're using a separate part of memory than you would be using if you were just doing the same type of question over and over again. As each new type of question arises, you're forced to dig around within your long-term memory and work out how to approach this new challenge. And this is in contrast to blocked out practice, where you only have to dig down and find that memory once, and then it's in your working memory and you can just copy what you did from the previous questions. The second hypothesis states that by interleaving your practice and by combining different topics, you are learning to differentiate between different types of question. You're learning to figure out what the question is on about and to work out what you need to remember. This is known as the discriminative contrast hypothesis. Let's think about an example. So after your first question, which was on, let's say, heart physiology, you come up to your second question, which is on the kidney. Now normally, this is not something that students might learn about in tandem with each other. Although these 2 organs are very closely paired within human physiology, it's common that they're taught in separate modules at medical school. Kidneys receive 25% of the blood straight from the heart, and much of the control of blood pressure is done by the heart and by the kidneys. But they're often taught separately. The 2 organs also clearly have very different roles within the body, and they have very different pathologies. So it does make sense sometimes to learn about them separately, but it's also important that people understand that they're a system. By interleaving these 2 subjects, when you're practicing them, you're going to gain new insight into the connection between them. And that's because you're going to be holding information about the first question still in your working memory while you start to think about the second. This will encourage new connections and new contrasts between these 2 topics. So you're probably now thinking, how can you put interleaved practice into practice? How can you take interleaved studying and put it into your revision? The fantastic thing about interleaved practice is that it perfectly combines with another wonderful revision technique: spaced repetition. I would recommend you give the following a go. Rather than practicing 10 questions on one topic, you revise 10 questions on 10 topics. So you might have been thinking that in the next 10 days you were going to do 10 questions on heart physiology, 10 questions on the lungs, 10 questions on the liver, and so on and so forth with 7 other topics. Instead, today I want you to do 10 topics in one set. So 1 question from each, and the same tomorrow, and the same for the next 10 days. At the end of it, you still will have done 100 questions, and you still will have done 10 questions on 10 topics. But by combining them, you are going to learn to work out what a question is asking you. You're going to learn to differentiate between different topics in an exam, and you're going to find new connections and new comparisons between these topics. You will have trained your brain to figure out what question you're being asked about. You're going to have triggered your subconscious to make new connections between these otherwise disconnected topics, which is going to really, really help you with your memory in an exam. And also you will have automatically spaced out your repetition. If you're looking a way to do this really easily and to just get started, then check out my last video, which was about making flashcards in Notion. Now this method really easily combines with what I've said in this video, and I really hope that you're able to put this into practice. Hopefully you found this video interesting and you're thinking about using interleaved practice to mix up your revision a little bit in the future. I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe from each and every one of you if you've enjoyed this video, and to be honest, even if not, I'd still appreciate the like and subscribe. If you have any advice for me, I would really, really love to hear it in the comments. I'm always looking for new and better ways to ramp up my studying, more interesting ways to study, and better ways to remember my content. So drop a comment below, tell me what you would like me to cover or what I should go away and learn for myself.